Hey y'all, it's Kat, host of Shuffle the Podcast and editor-in-chief at shuffleonline.net. And today I have a special guest, Daniel.
Hi, how are y'all doing?
He's a contributor with Shuffle Online, but he's new to the podcast. And you're also from Texas as well.
Dallas.
Yeah, fellow Texan. So I want to do throw it back to inside the Shuffle studio. So are you ready for some questions?
I'm nervous, but let's do this.
All right. So what are your top 3 favorite movies?
That'd be A Christmas Story, Birdman, and let me go with The Iron Giant.
And top 3 least favorite movies.
Ooh, okay. The Gallows, this horrible horror movie from 2015, The Purge election year, and that Seth MacFarlane movie, A Million Ways to Die in the West, that was god awful.
I haven't seen any of those. I probably shouldn't. Are you coffee or no coffee?
Absolutely no coffee.
Oh, really?
I can't stand it. I cannot stand it. I mean, I don't mind the smell of coffee. I actually really like that smell, but the taste, I just never got used to it. It kind of gets cold too quickly. So I'm a Dr. Pepper Vice man. And even then, I only drink that like once a week. So,
well, fair enough. And what gets you hype?
Ooh, a really good movie theater. Like when you walk into the movie theater and you just see like a really big ceiling and the popcorn smells great. Like you could smell kind of like fresh butter and there's like a buzz for whatever movie you're watching, whether it be like an MCU movie or like this really dope art house film that finally made it to Dallas. Just walking in and experiencing like all the new posters and the standees, that gets me excited to, watch a movie.
Green or red salsa? Answer carefully.
Oh, I know this. It's red.
No.
Red has the power.
No.
Red is delicious. Red looks better. Red is spicier.
I'll have to agree to disagree.
Oh, okay.
I'm a team green all the way.
We need more Team Redsters on this podcast. I feel outshined.
Yeah. Hopefully, I mean, maybe with our new additions, we'll get you some red teammates. So what's your favorite curse word?
Ooh, okay. Initially, I've got fuck as a good one, just a straightforward, like you can use it for pretty much everything and be totally fine. I'm also a big fan of just motherfucker. Anybody that can deliver a really good motherfucker, I think is a good human being. So, your Edward Nortons of the world, your Samuel Jacksons, your Al Pacinos, like anybody that can deliver just a good motherfucker. And what's great about that word too is that you can kind of hold the mother and everybody knows what you're about to say, but there's still like a little tingle of suspense as they wait for the payoff. So I like that word. I think it's a little bit classy.
Yeah, I like that word. And I shorten it in situations where you can't say the full word to this mofo. So
this MF spitting.
Yeah. A podcast, or are you more of a music person, or is it a blend of both? Depends on the situation. What's your preference?
If I'm driving more often than not, it's music, but I listen to podcasts when I'm doing work around the house, because with music, if I'm doing dishes, I kind of have to actively be thinking or listening to something, so I can kind of just leave my brain at the door and just let my body get into this repetitive motion of, grab soap, spray, water, scrub, and just kind of let that cycle go. So yeah, if I'm at home, podcast. If I'm driving, music.
Do you prefer going to the movies or Netflix streaming at home?
No, it's a theater thing.
Okay.
It kind of bums me out when I'm only watching movies at home for a certain while. Whenever I go to a screening, that's kind of like my church. I walk in, it's just everything feels okay again.
Yeah, I get that. And this is my favorite question. So if you died and you could go to any movie world and become any character you wanted. So you can even, switch them out, be a different character from a different world, whatever. Where would you go and who would you be?
So which movie world would I go to? There's a long pause as Daniel figures out what the hell he's thinking. I'm going to go with my favorite movie, and it's A Christmas Story. There's something about that movie that just conveys all the wondrous feelings I have about childhood and Christmas. And of course, it's not as like hokey or as some of the other ones. It's kind of like cheeky and naughty, but just to kind of experience childhood in that sort of like blissful, concentrated package, that'd be really nice. I never had an air rifle as a kid. I always wanted one. So I'm going to try to be Ralphie from Christmas Story. Beat the shit out of a bully every once in a while. That'd be nice.
That's a good one. I like those. Yeah, good answers. And today we're talking about To All the Boys I Loved Before, P.S. I Still Love You. But first off, I learned when we were talking about wanting to do this podcast that you actually hadn't seen the first one. So you kind of did a binge watch back to back of both of them, right?
Yeah, I spent the night before the sequel came out. I guess this was Wednesday. So I spent Tuesday night watching the first movie, kind of dug it, and then went to bed, woke up, saw the sequel first thing I did in the morning. So I'm pretty fresh to it. Don't know anything about the book. Barely knew anything about the movie except for the title. And yeah, that was it.
Like, do you watch these type of movies on the regular, or what was your kind of, I guess, mindset going into the first one?
I am a really big coming of age fan. It's actually my favorite topic to talk about in this decade because you've got, I think, a great renaissance that you haven't seen since the 80s. So with this decade, you've got stuff like Lady Bird, Sing Street, even in the TV shows with Sex Education. I think that show is absolutely fantastic. Go for like Morris from America, The Edge of 17, especially for girls, this decade has been surprisingly progressive and well-crafted in the types of stories that are coming out. So I like watching stuff like that. As far as like romance movies, one of my favorite movies of all time is About Time. And it's a little bit different in tone than this is. Is it really like high school? But I don't know. I'm a real big sucker for well-told romance stories. I like this. I like high school movies like Mean Girls too. I got introduced to that a couple years ago and I just fell in love with it. So I've got a pretty good penchant for this kind of stuff. Just have to find the right versions of it.
I went in, I didn't know anything about the book either when I saw the first one, and I absolutely loved it. I was obsessed. I think I watched it 5 times within 3 days or something. And then I had a huge crush like everyone. It was Noah Centineo. It was the internet's boyfriend. But then he started doing his Instagram stuff, and I've kind of tamed down. He's a 22-year-old boy and I'm 31. So it's the shine wore off a little bit, but
what's the Instagram stuff? I haven't heard about this.
No, it's just he just posts I think it's also and we can get into this, but the age gap, I'm not hip with I don't know, he posts really short videos, but that make no sense, and a lot of zoom, and it was just oh, you're just so childish. I don't know.
No, we're already getting to old. And we're already too old for this. That's what we're saying.
Yeah, and then that's what I realized, I guess, when I'm talking about this is it's probably just it just wore off. I realized the person was not the person in the movie, duh. And so I was ooh, okay.
That's fascinating that you still got that kind of high school crush mentality in the lizard brain somewhere.
Yeah.
Was that why you did it bring you back to high school, seeing Lara Jean's life? Was that it? Oh
my God. Yes, it did. And it's weird because you mentioned all the other films of the coming of age in this decade and stuff. And I feel this To All the Boys I Loved Before, when I saw it, it was the first one that really hit me hard in a long time, that took me back to me being 15, 16, with those feelings. It was just, pure, like, I was like, oh my God, why am I feeling like, I started thinking about, the boys I had crushes on, the guys I dated, and like those feelings again. And it was a hit, like a hit of nostalgia. And it was like, I guess, I don't know. I think it's because maybe it was from her perspective, and I had never really seen something that did it in a way that was also with everything else in the film. Like, it was not very stereotyped. It was not like the cliche kind of stuff that I couldn't relate to in other films. And just her way of thinking, and then also like them writing notes to each other. Like we used to do that, like.
Right.
And I don't know, it was just a lot of feelings when I watched that first one. And I think it brought me back to being like 16 again. And it was so cute and nice. And I think I also used to like the jocks too, and I think that's why like with the curly hair, like Noah Centineo's character, Peter Kavinsky. So I think it just hit me all over.
What's amazing about this one is I'm noticing what seems like for the first time this true blend of that 80s romanticism that we got in stuff like Breakfast Club and 16 Candles, Pretty in Pink, etc., the John Hughes stuff. For once, I feel like it's fully integrated with the sort of representation, or at least the visage of now. So other properties, I feel, try to ape the 80s a little too hard, whereas this one, even you hear it in the soundtrack, which is so synthy, but it's kind of like the new wave of new wave. More electronic influences in the score and such. But that's kind of what I think is hitting with so many people, is that for once, the movies that they loved from their childhood has a heroine that looks like them. The only problem is it only took Hollywood like 30 years to finally get there. Yeah. So that's kind of what I think makes this and subsequently the sequel stand out.
So in the sequel, P.S. I Still Love You, it basically is Laura Jean and Peter have just taken the relationship from pretend to officially official when another recipient of one of her old love letters enters the picture. When I watch these films, I wish I had them when I was in high school. I think it would have guided me a little bit better than some of the other films that I would watch that were more into like the guy's feelings and like what you had to do to get the guy, and and then the girls getting pitted against each other and all that stuff. And this one is just so nice and like positive, and I don't know. It just feels like a different kind of film that I wish I really had growing up. And I'm so happy that girls get to have that now. And even guys. I mean, I hope it kind of changes the mindset of like what like you don't have to be the machismo kind of thing, or like the jock or whatever, even though he is a jock in this film. But I mean, one step at a time, I guess.
Yeah, one of the things I enjoyed most about this one is that it places people on an equal footing. So much like those 80 movies, like you were saying, that the man would have most of the power and it all would be, how can I influence this person? And what these movies fail to realize is that it's an equal kind of transaction. Even if the power dynamic isn't necessarily equal, what Lara Jean does impacts Peter in the same way that what Peter does impacts Lara Jean. And so what I like about this one, I think a little bit more than the first one, is that there's just more going on. And hopefully something that I think might be explored in the third movie. I think there's a lot of insecurity in Peter that we haven't quite explored yet. And the movie drops lovely little nuggets that kind of go, okay, in another movie, I would see this as a failure because you don't address this in this narrative. But what's kind of cool about this Netflix thing is that even though the movie works as a movie and it's got its own beginning, middle, and end, I feel confident in knowing that the sequel can continue. It feels more like a limited series like Sherlock, those hour-and-a-half long episodes, to where, okay, this definitely has its own story, but I like these little nuggets you're leaving, and I have faith now that the sequel won't muck it up because of whatever box office pressure or executive comments might be done.
So for me, it's like when you just mentioned limited series and where it could go on life on its own, it'd be cool to see her go beyond Peter, cause I mean, who knows if it's going to work out, that would be too crazy. I mean, I'm sure in the third one, that's where I haven't read the book, so I don't know what's going to happen, but it could be cool to kind of go on beyond this and like how her feelings change and really be I don't know, really go from the high school feelings of what you thought love was and then go through like the college and all that. That would be really cool.
Yeah, just to kind of see her grow up, because as much as Lara Jean is insecure, and that's basically part of her character, one thing that I loved about this was kind of the growth that she's building, this personal growth and learning how to assert herself and become confident in what she wants and how and what she wants in a partner.
Well, I guess it just takes place kind of right away after the second one, even though it feels completely different. Obviously, it's been the actors have grown, and like the look is completely different. And
Kitty just grew an entire like 6 inches. It's a really quick growth spurt. I guess the obvious one is John Ambrose, who just got a really long beach vacation and hair change and DNA change. He's now played by some I know the name Jordan Fisher. Was he doing anything? I heard something about Disney Channel.
Yeah, he's like a musical person. So
there is this great part in this movie where he's playing the piano though, and apparently that was improvised, which like good on the guy if it is.
Yeah, he's very like, I think like he's done Rent Live, the TV movie. He's done a lot of like guest stuff, and then he was in She-Ra and the Princesses of Power TV series, which was 2018, 2019, and then Archibald's Next Big Thing, which was a TV series short in 2019.
I liked him in this one. I like that he is so very different from Peter. He reminds me a little bit more of me, and I saw a little bit of me in him just because I was not the jock in high school. I was definitely sort of the shyer, nerdier kid. But I feel like, and this is something that's fantastic that this decade has done to kind of push against the whole nice guy stereotype, which we got so much of with Josh in the first movie that it just kind of
overkill.
It really did kind of rub me the wrong way. I feel like we're pushing past that sort of stereotype. And what I like is that John Ambrose is definitely like a good guy at heart. And most of the kind of love triangle business here isn't kind of contrived. It's built out of miscommunication, to which for me, that feels more natural. For others, I've noticed that's for them like a criticism, like you set up this love triangle and you didn't go into it. I'm like, well, they did. They just built it a different way.
Because I think we've all been there in the sense of like you're with somebody, and then especially like in these years, like where it's teenage years and you're still figuring out what like love is and boyfriend girlfriend relationships and stuff, and you always have like, not necessarily like you're trying to look for options or whatever, but sometimes you still like these other people in different ways, and you have to figure that out. Like, oh, I'm with someone else, but like, do I really like this other person? And I think this was a good, clever way of doing that, in the sense of it's not necessarily they're in high school, and I mean, they're all in the same space. So it can be like a literal love triangle where like, you know, he's having to like compete with Peter or whatever. It's like in the head of Lara Jean where, you know, she goes and hangs out with John Ambrose and gets this like other, I don't know, he's fulfilling her in a different way. And then that's confusing to her. And it's nice that she was experiencing that on her own and not like in the presence of Peter. Because sometimes the things that challenge you in your relationship, you know, it happens outside of it and not like in the literal sense where we used to see in like the other kind of coming of age movies and relationship movies.
No, I get it. And as you're talking, I'm thinking more and more that the John Ambrose character has been described as the male Lara Jean. So in a way, she's kind of learning. She's not really falling in love with John Ambrose as much as she is falling in love with herself. It's like this is the person that she would want to be. And I don't know. It's interesting because John Ambrose isn't necessarily like the more confident. He's not the better version of Lara Jean. He's just got that kind of sensitivity, that patience, that look at the world. Like, I'm not really a people person. I'm not into all the jock kind of normal high school stuff. And so she admires that about him. But I think as she goes throughout the movie and she starts having these fights with Peter, she's learning that the love she feels for him is kind of like an externalizing of the love she ultimately has for herself. And I think what this movie did by introducing this concept of not necessarily compartmentalization, but she's definitely compartmentalizing the kinds of love that she's feeling. And because in high school, it's so brought up that you are either friends with somebody, you like them, you like them, or you love them. It's so regimented because I guess that's how high school indoctrinates the brain, so to speak. You're on a routine for 8 hours a day. So in exploring these grays in a world where you think is black and white, that troubles somebody, and seeing Lara Jean go through that, through this love triangle, I think is, like you said, an incredibly clever way to construct that concept.
Yeah, it really test her relationship with Peter, because I also think it does something where you kind of have a relationship with someone, or, you know, especially when you go to like the next level, like their boyfriend, girlfriend, now officially, you have to come to terms like, oh shit, I'm in a relationship now, and that's going to be judged, or I'm going to start thinking about it more. And I think when John Ambrose starts making fun of like, oh, remember that guy Peter, you know, and then she's like, oh shit, but like I'm with Peter, you know, and so it's
right.
Like, it questions, like when you're in a little relationship bubble, nothing can break you, but when you have to go out into the real world and people are going to see you as like the couple that, especially when you're 16, like that people's opinions and everything matters. But in this one, it's really cool because I think it wasn't necessarily people's opinions, it was her opinion, because she had been so, like you mentioned, she was trying to find herself and kind of get a grasp on who she is and who she wants to be. And I think that's what breaks, I think that's why I love this movie this series so much too, is because it's not necessarily, like, I also felt in some ways during parts of this movie, the relationship part was on the back burner, and it was more about her exploring herself and what she wanted to be. And I feel like in other films, we never get that. It's always about like, you know, the relationship is the center of it. And it was really nice seeing that in this film where she was doing shit she wanted to do. Like, she wanted to go to volunteer at the other place because it's going to look better on her college application, instead of going and dumbing herself down, you know, and just having a good time with her boyfriend. And I thought that was really cool. And that's such a good example for like people, you know, like for girls and everyone today. It's like, don't do things just because someone else wants you to do them, even if they're your partner or whatever. And she didn't feel the need to fit in either. She was like, I need to do this because I need to go to good college, you know, like, so that was also a small way of them just bring it into the modern age as well, which I really loved.
I was about to bring that scene up, and specifically because it's the healthiest, like, part of that relationship in the beginning of the movie. It's that one pocket of moment where Lara Jean really has it as a person and as being in a relationship, because she doesn't denigrate what Peter's doing at all. She just says, look, I've got this thing. We can hang out, meet later, but this is something I'm going to do. You enjoy your thing with your friends. Like, she's giving him space. She's kind of doing their own thing with this, within the framework of a relationship. So that part to me, I really liked. I loved everything about her trying to figure out what being a girlfriend means. Like you said, whenever John Ambrose is kind of making those little jabs at Peter, you know, those are friendly. But it's weird to think that, you know, that idea of like, if somebody makes fun of your type of music, you know, they're making fun of the music, but it's not making fun of you. In a weird way, it's reflecting on her. So I like seeing her kind of like take on a piece of Peter. And similarly, the way that Peter tries to take on a piece of Lara Jean, even though he's a giant like doughboy who cannot do poetry at all, at least he's trying. And it seems like a genuine attempt, even though he doesn't do it the way you should do it. You know, you probably shouldn't ape Edgar Allan Poe for a love poem, but, you know, apparently it's the only poet he knows.
Yeah, that was cute. Funny. Yeah. And then it's funny because when she finds out, she got a little mad, but then I like that they turned it around and she was like, she understood that he's not that type of person. And I think it's also... It's funny because this is like a teenage first relationship type thing for her, but it really does show you, like, if you haven't been in a serious relationship, and this is like your first one, or you have a first one. I mean, I had those growing pains where you're like, well, what do I do now? Because sometimes the idea of something is way different. Like you like, you know, she had imagined how it would be like, oh, I'm going to do this and that and whatever. And then you actually get in it and you're like, oh, like, I don't know what to do. Like, you know, so I thought that was really cool because I've had those, I mean, even in adulthood, like I had a first serious relationship, what turned out to be my marriage now, but it was like growing pains where you're like, oh, well, I'm doing me over here, but like, oh yeah, I have to do some stuff for our relationship. So, I mean, I think that's also probably why I, that whole montage of like series of things in the movie where she's like, they're kind of getting at each other because they think they have an idea of what they both need, but then it's completely not what they need because they're trying to please an idea of what they think they should be doing for the other person. And that's just like relationship 101. And what you figure out right away is like, you guys got to talk about it. You know, it's like, and also what this film does too, which is I think really important as well, is it showcases the past relationship and how you get over that kind of thing when you get into a relationship with someone who's has an ex-girlfriend or ex-boyfriend, and dealing with that aspect of it. Cause she couldn't get over the fact like, oh, what if he's doing this, or he's already done this with her. He's taken me to the same place as her. Like, what does that mean? Am I not special enough? You know? And I thought that was really another interesting layer because we all have gone through that too. And if you go down that road, it's just going to like, it's not going to be good. And then you don't give the person that you're with enough credit, you know, like in that sense of like, he's with you. If he wanted to be with the other person, he would be with that other person. And so it's a lot of assumptions that happen. And I think this movie did a good job of showing how assumptions and assuming things and not talking about it leads to bad, like, you know, the miscommunication.
I think what this film does is it takes a lot of the frameworks of what we expect from high school and purposefully gets into that kind of nitty gritty. And maybe subversion is a little too strong of a term, but it feels like, for example, that ex-girlfriend thing, you know, the idea that Lara Jean has of her first relationship, that this is supposed to be special for both of them, because if it's not, then that reflects poorly on you. That's totally a framework just invented by the movies that she loves, the music that she loves. But it does reflect a real fear. Like, the strongest parts of this movie were when Lara Jean was sitting there thinking about Jen and letting what she thought of the relationship infiltrate her. And that's a true fear. That's something where, you know, what's strange is that Peter and Lara fell for each other because of these human moments where they related to themselves outside of the context of high school, a fake relationship, etc. But once you get put into that, you know, it doesn't come instinctually to Lara Jean to be like, oh, I'm going to dress up and support my boyfriend at the lacrosse thing. And, you know, she takes great pride in that. One of the things I love about Lara Jean is she's so meticulous and detailed about the things she really cares about. And that's contrasted with her stupidly messy room, which, I mean, hey, it's the same thing.
I had that kind of messy room, so I love it.
Yeah, that care that she takes in things that she really prides herself in. I love seeing that kind of stuff. But just like seeing her get adjusted to those things, seeing her get adjusted to the concept of a first date and how much is all the way, and these feelings that what's strange is that she's never had to confront them before. Anything about sex, I don't even think sex was on her mind in the first movie. It was always just these romances and these ideas. And what I loved about the framework of the first movie too is that it was bouncing off, you know, the real situation versus a fake emotion versus like a fake situation, the hot tub from the first movie, but now there's real emotion into it, because she has to confront the kind of being exposed in the high school hierarchy for the first time. And it's just, I like the way this movie bounces back and forth between what is expected and uses these cliches or tropes from 80s movies to kind of build that world, but then go deeper into it, pull out the real character, and slowly have that character kind of take over what's expected, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
No, it does. And I think that's why it's funny, because it's so embedded, those 80s movies and you know, other films of like the 90s and 2000s even, that I was always expecting Laura Jean, even as a viewer, to do those stereotypical cliche things and also have Peter do those things. But it's so nice being able to kind of see films like this that are just reflective of like what you went through and what you wish you would have had as well to see. We talked about, you know, the Jen thing and Laura Jean dealing with her feelings and assuming that Peter's going to her because, you know, he still likes her, or he still wants this, you know, he has this connection with her that she can't beat. And then so when she goes through her whole monologue and they had broken up and she's like, I need to confront, you know, the thing that, you know, is holding me back. And she confronts Jen. It was so nice seeing that moment between the two of them, because in so many films before it was always, and in society, it's always woman against woman, you know, like, oh, you have to be, if someone dated your boyfriend before, you have to be, you guys can't be friends at all. Like that's off limits. You hate her and your friends will hate her and everything like that. And I thought this did just so much for breaking that stereotype. And also hopefully in society, we're leaning towards a more, you know, in this sense of like, it's not that person's fault. Like your husband, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your wife is going to have previous relationships. And if they were in previous relationships, they probably had a connection with those people, and it can't just break overnight. And yeah, there's limits of like appropriateness, whatever. But the fact that like Jen is like, hey, my parents are going through a divorce. Peter's gone through a divorce. And obviously they were close. So she was able to talk to him about it. The fact that Laura Jean finally confronted that was just, I feel like, a step towards something pretty awesome on film, and in terms of like women relationships and breaking those stupid stereotypes of like, we have to pit each other against each other instead of just talking to each other. Like she was assuming all these things. And then Jen even said like, he loves you, you know, like he's just coming to me because like he feel, you know, he's like a friend now, but he likes you. So to me, that was probably one of my favorite moments of the film overall, is just showing that, hey, we should just talk to other women too, like, and not assume all these bad things, because it's probably all in your head and it's probably not true.
You know what's surprising about this is that so many movies would be better if we just embraced honesty. Because in those honest, complicated feelings are the real juicy parts of, like, that's more interesting to me than seeing a catty relationship. Even at the beginning of the movie, seeing Jen be a dick to Lara Jean is just like, okay, we're still doing this now. But no, that scene, and especially the concept of Jung, the idea that you've got relationships with people, no matter what has happened in that relationship, there was still a connection. That connection is lifelong. And that's why, you know, you'll occasionally be on Facebook and you'll see like a person scroll by that you haven't talked to in 10 years that you might have dated or crushed on. You kind of just feel that flicker because, you know, there was something. And that's not wrong to still feel that way. It's human, it's emotional, and basically ensures that you're not dead, that you're not like a sociopath who uses people for the time being. And I just like those honest exchanges. And I like that this movie also is finding honest ways to say I love you in ways that don't quite fit the narrative. I think the most romantic line in this movie is Lara Jean and John Ambrose, they're dancing in the snow, they've kissed. She realizes that her feelings towards him are not romantic, and so she's running to get Peter. It's the backwards Cinderella, so to speak. She runs out there, Peter is standing there, and you're thinking, okay, that's cool. And then she's asking him, like, what are you doing here? He says, well, you don't like to drive in the snow. And my heart broke in like 5,000 pieces. It was better than any poem. It's better than any I love you in the world, because that's the way that, personally, that's the way I show love. Is I pay attention. The details are important. You know, I know that you don't like this, so I'm going to be there. I'm going to help support you in this way. And paying that attention in an intimate, focused way is just, that's the most romantic shit ever.
Yeah, I got kind of teary-eyed just remembering that moment.
It's so good!
Because I remember all the moments that I've had in my relationship, and it hasn't been like it doesn't happen like it does in the movies. It's like, it's not like, oh my God, like you brought me this thing and like there was candles all over. It was like, no, I was fucking like with my wisdom teeth and you brought me like an ice pack and like put my movie on or something, you know, like,
right.
Like those are the better moments of love for me too. And I think that was a really good moment. It wasn't it was iconic in that sense. Like it made it iconic just in a different way, but it wasn't like he wasn't trying to be over the top like we've seen in the, those other films that lead us to have these expectations of love and relationships that just lead us down a bad path. But this one was real, and it was so nice. Like, even though he knew they were like not even like boyfriend girl, but he was like, oh fuck Laura G, like it was just so good.
Yeah. Even more than when he says, Covey, break my heart like a million pieces. That's definitely like
that was
his
too
version
cheesy.
of a monologue.
Yeah.
But that moment, that truthful kind of exploration, like, this is who you are. I've kind of like adopted a piece of you into me. And as you build in a relationship and as you bring more people into your life, that level of honesty, that level of analysis, of like really actively listening, taking in what a person needs and altering yourself in a way that can just, make it a little bit easier. Those are the strongest, I guess, efforts or showings of love that, again, the more honest you are in your art, I think the better it's going to live and the longer it's going to live. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like the whole Valentine's Day thing where they were, which I thought was hilarious. It was like the new Mean Girls, like, and none for you, Gretchen, and none for Gretchen Wieners, like the candy canes or whatever. Or was it? No, it was Christmas, I think, not Valentine's, but that's what it reminded me of. But like they would come and sing, kind of like Glee style. You would pay someone to like come into class and sing for your Valentine in this film. And then she was like waiting because someone tells her, oh yeah, he gave Jen all these like they came every period or whatever.
Right.
And so then she didn't expect it. I mean, at first she didn't, but then people put it into her head and she's like, oh well, that's the way he showed her love. But that's not even the way she would have wanted it. Like if that would have happened to her, she would have been so embarrassed and she wouldn't have liked it ultimately. Like it would have been just something that was done for her. And then he even says it like, I thought you wouldn't have liked it, and she's like, yeah, you're right. Like she even says it like, yeah, I wouldn't have liked that. But yeah,
it's that back and forth of expectation and what a person, it's getting behind the veneer and figuring out what a person truly wants.
Yeah, it's like I always think 500 Days of Summer is one of my favorite films, but that one was in a more sad context, but it was like expectations versus reality is like a huge thing across the board, is like, and also just being honest with yourself. Like, you've talked a lot about, this film shows a lot of honest moments, but it shows a lot of honest moments, Laura Jean, like she really finds out who she is, and when she thinks things are not going right between her and Peter, and like, she learns about the hot tub thing, which I thought was like, ooh, that was not a good one either.
That was...
Yeah, I was like, you guys need to talk about that though in the third one.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, okay.
That was not cool.
See, in any other movie, that whole subplot being kind of tossed aside, I would have had a problem with, but that's kind of where we are in the weird cross-pollination of TV and film and the form in which we're ingesting film. That sounds really like I'm eating a TV or whatever.
I mean, we kind of are sometimes, like it's just coming at us. Yeah.
Yeah. But in the way that we're taking on this long form storytelling, I'm like, you know what? I'm pretty sure, since I know there's another movie coming, I'm not mad that this thing isn't being addressed in this way yet.
I mean, I guess the only complaint that now, like, we're bringing it, because this movie, I mean, it's good, and I think it brings up a lot of good stuff, but it's not like a perfect film, but that one, sometimes the characters are a little like annoying in that sense. Like he's like, I gotta go. And it's like, well, just like talk one more minute and then it would be solved. You know, like there's a lot of that in this movie too. And I'm like, and I guess that's the nature of the movie. It's supposed to be that way and whatever. But that stuff too is like, this could have been solved way before if you guys would have just talked about it. But I guess if I think about it, I mean, sometimes you don't have the conversations and you just get so wrapped up in your emotions where you're like, oh yeah, whatever. Okay. Yeah. You were going to go to the hot tub and that's it. And so bye. And like, without even thinking like rationally. So I guess maybe in some ways that is honest, but I guess in a movie sense, when you watch it, it's like, oh, why are you doing that? Like they can seem a little annoying. I don't know.
Yeah, it's that give and take, I think, of where we have come from in these kinds of movies and where we're going. One of the things that I enjoyed most about the fight right before he gets on the bus is that you can tell in Centineo's performance there's that insecurity. There's that still kind of cog turning in the brain about maybe Lara Jean by the end of this movie has understood what Jung means, but I don't think Peter has. I think Peter's still in the back of his head really hung up on this relationship and how it went down. And I think he's got a lot more on the brain that we've come to see from him. So that, again, I'm hoping the third movie explores some of this. And you know, sometimes you're in a fight and you just want to be right. You just want to end it. And it's so weird how sometimes an emotion can kind of influence you not to discover the problem, but just to end the fight. Like, I've got my list of weapons here and I know what thing I can say that will shut you up and how long I'll have to make it up in order to make this work. So that kind of stuff, we make those split-second decisions out of just fear and out of defensiveness. And I saw a lot of that built into here. One of the things I'm not the biggest fan of is, and again, I'm putting a lot of faith in the fact that there's going to be a sequel to this, but some of the subplots I didn't feel were kind of dropped off at the door, like Dr. Covey falling in love with this new neighbor and reconciling with the death of his wife. One of the great ways I thought they brought representation into this movie is that he wants the daughters to embrace their Korean heritage, but as much as there's kind of like a cultural incentive there, there's also this kind of selfish need. Like he really wants to connect with this memory of his dead wife. And it's so heartbreaking. And first off, John Corbett is the one we should be standing here. John Corbett has been a legend and a treasure for years. And oh my God, he's like the best dad. He's the best bumbling, like egghead. I just love John Corbett in every single way. Also, where is Josh? Is he just not here?
It's just, I guess the thing is that when you establish in the first one, so much of these characters, like you establish the sister connection. I mean, that was like a point of, contention and like the whole Josh thing with them. And then you just like kind of wipe them out from this one. Like we have to assume that she hasn't talked to her sister when in the first one it was all about that, but I mean, I guess in some ways you understand like they're doing their own thing, whatever. Also, it's a movie, can't do everything or it becomes too much, but I also felt like they did that with the other characters as well. Like with Kitty, she was kind of just there. She was a big part of the first one and I kind of felt gypped because she's one of the highlights of the film for me. And the fact that she wasn't going to school with, like, they cut out all of that. And I know it's probably just because they didn't have enough room and they're probably trying to do all this stuff, but it did feel like a lot of the things like from the first one were cut when they should have at least been mentioned. Like you talked about with Josh and like the friends around them too kind of faded away. And maybe that's part of like the whole thing of like, it was just all about Lara Jean and Peter. And when you get in a relationship, especially in high school, things tend to fade away too. So that could be a whole choice in the movie itself, or I could just be giving it too much credit and they couldn't fit those things in.
Maybe. The thing with the first movie, and the reason I actually really like this movie more is the first one, I guess the construction of the fake relationship to an extent felt kind of convoluted. This really could have been solved with just like a minute's worth of conversation on both sides. And I know Lara Jean was still so entrenched in kind of like if we're discussing matters of love, I have to use the handbook being this Fabio book that I've got under my bed. And that stuff might have influenced her a lot more in the first movie than this one. But still, as a movie, if we're just kind of talking about the construction, I felt like so much of it kind of held on the situation, and once the situation was broken, then kind of all the emotion just kind of spilled out really quickly. Whereas in this one, I felt most of the conflict was built out of character and out of that sort of inner struggle, and that's the kind of stuff that I think will linger and help build the character through. I do miss the kind of 3 stages of development that you get out of the sisters, because I mean, Kitty is just full blown fantasy, and Margot being off on her own in Scotland, like a completely different country, doing college, she's really entrenched in the real world. And then you've got Lara Jean kind of in the middle, crossing over. So I would have loved to see more of that sisterly interaction, that sort of development that, you know, if you're a 11-year-old girl watching this, or if you're 31 watching this, you kind of understand where you're at and you can relate to these situations and stories in an honest way. I kind of miss a lot of that.
Also, I think for me, I really enjoyed this one too, because the technical aspects were really good and it really upped the ante, I feel like, in terms of, man, the color palette is so good. And it does remind you of like those 80s movies, but a little bit brighter, just because technology and what we have now. And I think the 80s were more pastel neon, you know, and these are a little bit more, I don't know, they just pop a little bit more like pop art, but still with the same kind of hues. And obviously that's reflected with Lara Jean's outfits and like how she presents herself. And it's like whatever she's wearing is representing her emotions and like where she's at with Peter. And I love that kind of, I'm a big fan of like costume representing like all these other things, because like 500 Days of Summer is one of my favorite films, and costume and like character design was a big part of that film. And then also just like is extra care in terms of like the character, and I don't know, just brings it to life a little bit more. And then also the shots were amazing. And then I learned later that the director's a cinematographer. Like this is his first feature film, and I was like, oh duh, no wonder they're so beautiful. Like I was like, this is way better than I think what this film should be, like in terms of shots and framing. And I was like, why is this so good? Like I would just want to look at it even if I had the sound off. I was like, I just want to look at it. The framing of shots and the way he chose to portray certain things just like added so much to it. I don't know what you think about it, but I don't know, that was really awesome for me. And of course the music soundtrack was pretty spot on.
The score is excellent. I love a lot of the blocking, you know, that scene when they're at the, I guess, beer pong party, and you do see such like a visible lane. It feels like Peter is way farther away than she is, and it's kind of blocked off. It's almost like she's watching her boyfriend from the kitchen in like a completely other world. It's like she's standing outside of a building looking in. Anything with the aquarium, I love the way they frame those shots. The aquarium
was amazing.
I mean, I'm just a sucker for nautical stuff, but even, you know, if we're taking...
And the jellyfish, it was like so...
I like jellyfish.
The lighting was so... And it was a depressing... That was one of the sad moments, because they're breaking up, and a new iconic breakup moment for, you know, like the generation. I was like, oh my God, I wish I was 16 now. But
yeah, and then you're seeing Peter, and behind him is just like, I love the blacks in this movie. It's so intense and contrasted, and so it really does feel like his heart is completely breaking. It almost reminded me a little bit of Annie Hall in the placement of where they are, how distant they are, who has the power. And with him, who normally towers over Lara Jean, the way that shot was framed kind of just shrunk him down damn near to nothing. And it was just, I like that the director, cinematographer knows how to present these elements in a way that fits the story incredibly well. I also love little details, like whenever they're introducing like a new chapter of the story, they've got it like on a banner or on a flyer somewhere. That's pretty neat. I love the moment when Lara Jean has just broken up with Peter and the sad pop song is playing. You like pan down and it's Lara Jean lip syncing the song, because we all did that. And if you did it, you're lying. You played your sad Breaking Benjamin music and walked around your high school like muttering the sad emo thoughts of a 13 or like 15-year-old to yourself.
Oh my God.
I just love little moments like that.
I love that scene because I was like, yes, that was me. I was listening to Damien Rice or whatever. Like,
oh God, I love Damien Rice. That's, oh my God.
Yes.
Cheers, Darling, like soundtracked so many of my breakups. Just bitter, angry, but like classy sad boy feels.
Like you felt like at least you were like doing it right, or like it wasn't like, I don't know. I remember I put it on the other week or so, and I was like, man, this is depressing, because I'm like in a happier place, right? And I was just like, geez, I was emo. Like
it's so like just bitter, but it's bitter not even in a way that like I hate you. It's like I feel so bad about myself, and like hopefully you'll see that this pain makes me bitter too. And it's like mix that with the whole like I'm smoking cigarettes. Like, you're 15, you're not chain smoking outside a Parisian bistro, but in your head you are.
Yeah.
And so I love when Lara Jean's like just taking that completely on. I love the concept of a pensive bake. The fact that she's I love that that's her way of thinking. Yeah, I love that shit. I clean whenever I'm thinking.
Yeah, that was funny. So there was a few moments that really aged us in this movie. And maybe the young people won't know what we're talking about because they're young right now. But there was a moment where they were, well, there was a few moments. So it was like one where the guy was like, oh yeah, in 5th grade, I loved Michael B. Jordan or something like that, right?
Yeah, it was, no, they were at the party. And they were talking to, what is it, Lucas is her friend? And he says that he had a crush on Michael B. Jordan in Creed when he was in the 5th grade.
Oh my God. And I was like,
And I was like, wait a minute. Okay, so this is taking place in real time. That was 4 years ago. This guy is 15. I was 22 when I saw Creed. And you were in like 5th, like I remember where I was in 5th grade. That was Shrek 2 and Ocean Avenue.
That
what
was
the
like
hell?
NSYNC and Backstreet Boys for me. Like, what the hell? Like,
the Backstreet Boys moment freaked me out too, because that song is like more than 20 years old.
Oh my God!
And they had contrasted the acapella of that to the acapella of Ocean Eyes by Billie Eilish, and I just saw my entire life just fly by. In less than a minute.
That was a bit sad for me. I was like, what am I doing with my life watching this movie? Like, like I was just like, this is bad. Cause I was 4 years ago, I was 27. Yeah. So that's kind of sad. And then the other part was like one of the guys says, "Oh, Linkin Park still slaps," and I was just like, "Oh my God!"
The phrase "Linkin Park slaps" should not be uttered in any modern context. Like, let's be honest, did we even have a word? Was it just Linkin Park rocks back when we were growing up?
Okay, I'm gonna be honest, and it's gonna age me. Like, I'm not down with the lingo unless I see it. Like, even I think I tweeted out this whole like the stan thing, you know, like I stan this, and then like I tweeted it out just to like, I don't know what, and I felt like I kind of like, I don't know, I felt a little cringy myself, and I'm like, I'm never gonna do this again. But the slaps thing too, like I can't do it. Like I'm like,
slaps.
I'll do it in my head and I'll do it, but I don't know if I've ever tweeted it out or anything, and I don't think I've ever mentioned it in my real life. Like,
so you're not walking down the street in Austin just like listening to Damien Rice and you're just like, you know,
Damien Rice still slaps.
Damien Rice slaps. That volcano slaps.
Oh my, the blower's daughter slaps so hard.
Cannonball is a bop. Do you use bop?
No, I don't use bop.
You don't use bop? Okay, I like using
I had
bop.
not even like heard of that.
Well, it's a bop. Like you bob
Oh,
your head.
yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
get it. Like it's cool. What messed me up about the Linkin Park line was I was still stuck in the timeline. So I'm thinking, okay, this is 2019. They dug up the Linkin Park ticket from like their 5th grade time capsule, and I was like, okay, what was Linkin Park doing in 2014? And I was like, oh, they just released the one good record after like 2 shitty pop records. This wasn't even like Minutes to Midnight. This
Yeah,
was like,
it wasn't even like OG Linkin Park. It was like
it wasn't. Like it was the weak sauce. It wasn't even Project Revolution, Linkin Park. It was weak sauce, Living Things to Hunting Party, which was still pretty good, but it's not as great as the rest.
it wasn't even Transformers Linkin Park.
God, it wasn't Transformers like 2 or 3 because they were on the soundtrack like 3 times.
Yeah, they were like Linkin Park was Transformers, like that song. Oh my god.
Yeah. It's like What I've Done and
Yes.
New Divide that was on the radio in 2009. But this kid's watching Linkin Park friggin' when they sucked 5 years later.
Oh my god, they were like 5 years old in 2009. Like
I was in high school in 2009.
I was a sophomore in college in 2009.
Like, I'm trying to picture this. Wait, no, they were 10, 5. So, like, what's messing me up now is kind of like the Billie Eilish generation is when she'll talk about, like, being a believer. And, like, she's, like, 8. And that stuff's, like, weirding the hell out of me. I wonder if that's how my parents feel.
There was a lot of that in this, like, watching this film really put to the forefront how old I am.
And that's kind of what I love about coming of age in general is that surprisingly, the more specific you get, the more universal the story feels.
I'm happy that it's found a home at Netflix and it's going to continue on.
Right.
And I think it's going to be a really nice trilogy for this kind of like romantic coming of age story and dealing with yourself and for the modern age. And I really appreciate it. And I think it's just better than we deserve or that we've actually needed for a long time. And it's long overdue. Actually. Right. Yeah. So, yeah.
It doesn't have the veneer of some like cancer kid or like this awkward,
yes.
I can't step outside, otherwise I'm going to burn in the sun type angst and drama. Like, that's just Harlequin novels, but in a different weird fetishy way. It's something I think Phantom Thread skewers wonderfully, but it's a different movie.
Yeah. I don't know. It's been fun. I think it's definitely, the first film was nice, and it's fun because looking back at the first one, it's like, oh my God, I just feel like everything with me is nostalgia now, but even if it's like a year old, but the first one was really nice, especially, it was kind of like a John Wick thing. Like you knew about it first before the masses came to like, oh, I love it too. But it's like, you weren't there before.
Right.
Yeah. So I also have that kind of feeling with this series is like, hey guys, I watched it 5 times before you ever did. Like, and then now you're like in the sequel, you're like coming out now, like get off.
Now you have your parties. And now you've got I'm going to stay up till 2 a.m. and live tweet, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, where were you in the first one? Yeah. Where were you? But yeah, it's all in good fun though. I love that this film is like one of the ones that it's like taking over pop culture a little, or like over Twitter. It's a
I like
one.
that.
Yeah.
There positive. Are definitely worse examples of teenage love to aspire to or to model yourself after, or to look up to. This stuff is good.
And then do you have any other final thoughts on the film?
I think it's pretty good family film across the board. There's definitely a big focus on the teenage romance of it. I don't think it's particularly lewd in any way. It's not a book smart, even though I love that for its own things. This is definitely more of preteen to maybe early college is like the demo for it. But I think there's enough in this film that I think it's a 4-quadrant movie to be as Hollywood cynical about it as possible. I think it's a good film for everybody. to watch and enjoy.
Yeah, I mean, you can be 31 and enjoy it too.
You can be 26 with a beard and enjoy this movie.
But maybe just gawk at the references that age you, but you can still enjoy.
However, if you think that Linkin Park slaps, you just need to calm down.
Unfriend me now. Unfriend me now. So where can we find you on wherever you want to be found on the web? What's your
Daniel
address?
Berrios is in the witness protection program. He does not want to be found anywhere. No, I can be found on the illustrious shuffleonline.net as a contributor. You can find me on Twitter at Daniel Berrios, that is Berrios 93. I can also be found on YouTube occasionally. I'll probably be filming something after this. You might actually be able to see all the stacks of DVDs I've got over there for a video.
Oh, nice.
Bottom corner. Yeah, you could do that as well. YouTube.com/Daniel Berrios 93. Pretty easy to find.
Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. We'd really appreciate it. And if you want to follow us, please follow Shuffle the Podcast on Twitter and Instagram at Shuffle the Pod. You can follow Shuffle Online on Twitter and Instagram at Shuffle Online. And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Things Cat Loves. That's CAT. Until next time.